Ever wanted to reenact the iconic samurai single duel, but with a double-barreled shotgun instead? Well, New Blood and David Szymanski's 2018 game DUSK is exactly the game for you. You see exactly what's happening on the screen. This is distilled boomershooter, Twitch shooter, beloved Unreal Tournament clone. Either way, it's peak. But there is more to DUSK than the excellent gameplay. Scratch beneath the seeming grimy brown US northeastern surface, and soon a world most horrifying rears its non-Euclidean face. DUSK is not just about testing the limits of its protagonist's creaky knees, but recounts throughout a narrative most certainly horror on its surface and downright Lovecraftian in its consequences. Venture too far from blissful ignorance, and terrifying vistas of reality may appear. I won't go through the minutiae of every single level, but allow me a quick moment to talk about the gameplay first. After all, you should be playing DUSK instead of watching this video. You are Dusk Dude, Double D, or Heretic, as is the preferred local nomenclature, returning to and exploring the gloomy city of Dusk, your average town in Pennsylvania, due to an extended absence which, granted, is quite understandable. There was some community speculation about Dusk Dude being a treasure hunter, given his proclivity towards massive, ethically sourced diamonds. But quite frankly, who wouldn't be motivated by massive gemstones? What? Double D's backstory isn't all that important, and is only hinted at and alluded to throughout the game, specifically the last chapter. What is most important is your journey from meat hooks and ignorance to, well, where exactly? First though, and most importantly for a shooter, your weapons of choice. They are surprisingly grounded, at least in boomershooter terms. Although, I suppose even Lockheed Martin hasn't managed to develop a handheld, semi-automatic rocket launcher yet. It is only a matter of time though. There are no remarkably magical weapons, except the sword, a Birmingham classic, and the soap, the true bane of yinsers across the entirety of Pennsylvania. They all serve their purpose, however, which is to be individually useful, not just aesthetically different, but functionally the same. Now maybe you're thinking in terms of where. I'll use the long rifle for sniping, the crossbow to precisely line up the perfect piercing multi-hits, and the pistol to immediately switch away from upon realizing your hotkey mistake. This is incorrect. The where you are for every weapon is barreling at least 70 miles per hour throughout the air, courtesy of bunny hopping, or strafe jumping for the Quake bros watching in their nursing homes. DUSK will quickly teach you that standing still means defeat, even on normal difficulty. You will learn to use each weapon while in constant motion, and subsequently learn the individual strengths of these weapons from that context. Remember, an object in motion stays in motion unless acted upon by an outside force, like shitting yourself the first time you encounter a horror. Ammo conservation is a concern, especially if you panic easily like me and constantly waste your ammunition on the fucking rats. And you can't be a choosy beggar when the friendly neighborhood pitbulls, all serendipitously named Princess, are barreling straight towards your unprotected neck. You will use every weapon, except the pistols. For instance, enemies with slow, recharging attacks present excellent strike opportunities for the shotgun or the sword, all while strafe jumping. Large quantities of enemies will group and herd towards you, allowing you to dispatch them all with either AoE or piercing weapons, while strafe jumping, and foes, either too dangerous close up or ignoring the law of gravitation, make excellent targets for your long rifle. All while strafe jumping, of course. To prove yourself worthy, you must truly stunt on these hoes. But what exactly does proving yourself worthy mean in DUSK? The game is split into 3 episodes. The first being the foothills, where you find yourself about to be turned into 100% Shop Nigoroth certified kebab meat.
Kill the intruder.
At this early stage in the game, we don't know whether the disembodied voice is diegetic or not, but do not doubt that DUSK wears its horror genre on its sleeve. As mentioned, the Pennsylvania visuals are brown, grey, and viscous. The entire first episode exists in a more grounded tradcore horror element. Derelict farmsteads, industrial quarters, sewers, an old church. Exactly the sort of places you'd expect no good to be happening, especially when it concerns large inbred men with chainsaws. The enemies in this chapter reflect the same. A veritable potpourri of classic horror trope characters and entities, all fitting with the brown, dull aesthetic initially presented. This is where we first encounter the cult, seemingly having taken over every rural area surrounding the city of Dusk before taking over the entire city itself. Very Lovecraftian, reminiscent of the decrepit seaside town of Innsmouth, Massachusetts, featuring the same traits from the levels of the first episode of Dusk: abandoned Georgian churches, dilapidated industrial areas, and being remarkably secluded. Innsmouth itself was purged by a Lovecraftian cult, and when you finally do make it to Dusk, PA proper, you find the same. Every inhabitant gone, with only David Duke cosplayers and HEECU rejects remaining. Much like a Lovecraftian tale, the dull mundanity is a perfect setting to the erosive darkness of whatever haunts this stretch of Pennsylvania. It starts with the McKeesport Chainsaw Massacre bros and leads further and further into the mysterious circumstance of an entire city's disappearance. The mystique builds as more evidence of the cult's doings are discovered. The intrinsic human nature to explore, to be inquisitive, is of course greatly rewarded by the game with secret locations full of goodies, and is undoubtedly the driving motivation. After all, you returned to Dusk for answers, and hung up on meat hooks received only more questions. It seems that the descent further into the dark unknown is a given, despite warnings to the answers you may find. We might have known from the first that human curiosity is undying, and that the results we announced would be enough to spur others ahead on the same age-old pursuit of the unknown. So far, however, nothing a boomstick moving at 90 miles per hour can't handle. But now, the relatively boring environment of the first episode now stands further in contrast to episode 2, the facilities, where ancient temples and mind-bending sites of experimentations are unveiled. The industrialized horror of the facilities may explain where the inhabitants of Dusk disappeared to, but the why remains explicitly unexplained. It seems that the laboratories, once staffed by presumably moderately sane scientists, met their match seeking knowledge in the eldritch temples and ruins. Scarecrows coming to life is for sure terrifying, and would easily rank top 5 in things you'd rather avoid running into at night, especially considering their penchant for 10-gauge street sweepers. But the true horror is realized in the unknowable capacity of the facilities you are exploring in episode 2. The oldest and strongest emotion of mankind is fear. And the oldest and strongest kind of fear is fear of the unknown. The geometry that was familiar but challenged by the gruesome inhabitants has given way to infrastructure completely outside the scope of our understanding. The Escher Labs may not literally be the usual stomping ground for an eldritch horror story, but it is the perfect place for a curious, rational mind to seek understanding, to document, classify, and explore the unknown. But each voyage into the unknown is to venture into cosmicism, the insignificance of humanity. The sciences, each straining in its own direction, have hitherto harmed us little, but someday the piecing together of disassociated knowledge will open up such terrifying vistas of reality and of our frightful position therein that we shall either go mad from the revelation or flee from the deadly light into the peace and safety of a new dark age. And what is the Escher Labs, if not a terrifying vista of reality, our base understanding of fundamental geometry shattered, or the infernal machine and its industrialized consumption of man-meat? The unknown, that which is beyond our comprehension, evokes the strongest reaction, which you'd think biohistorically meant to skedaddle. But in horror stories like Dusk, it is inverted. When ignorance becomes more terrifying than revelation, you are compelled to seek answers. Lovecraftian protagonists themselves are often driven by a need to resolve the tension between the mundane reality they trust and the glimpses of the cosmic truth they fear. Here, you will also find a face to the omniscient voice haunting you. A portrait of a nice-looking fella hangs on the walls of the Escher Labs, receiving a slight makeover later on. He is not just the cult leader, but also representative of the mundane's gradual metamorphosis into the unknown. Much like how the geometry of the game world changes further and further from our humble beginnings in Pennsylvania as we descend towards the truth, further towards being worthy of answers, but further away from our little placid island of ignorance. By episode 3, it is abundantly clear that the cult, or rather what the cult circulates, is wholly cosmic in its foundation and downright ancient in its design. The Nameless City, a reference to a Lovecraft story, is where you must go to uncover the truth. From here on, anything Pennsylvania is squarely left behind, except for the rat hordes, of course. The purpose is to contrast how far we have come from the ordinary environment of episode 1 against visions of our lost family, islands without matter, and lands where the laws of physics are malleable. Here, we are truly staring the unknown outer in its face, and there are no other options except to push forward. The penultimate showdown is both yours and the cult leader Jacob's final test. And what a test that is. There are quite a few bosses in Dusk, but most act like you would expect, as dignified NPCs, patiently cycling through their attack state sequences while you avail yourself of the game world physics. Jacob, however, immediately engages you in the most time-honored single combat, quake-free strafe jumping. Mechanically, you recognize every trick he uses. It's basically your own playstyle turned against you. The mirror match is symbolically significant, exactly because you and Jacob are, at this final threshold, the one and same. Sure, your respective backstories were clearly different, but your motivation is the same. Seek knowledge, pursue answers, and become worthy of the truth, only able to be bestowed by something entirely beyond our understanding.
Do you now see? Do you understand?
It's pretty much confirmed that Double D's motivation is to seek answers, but not much is known about Jacob, presumably a resident of pre-cultification Dusk, perhaps a member of the science team that experimented with the deep artifacts found in the ancient temples. Did he delve too deep? Too deep into the mines, or too deep into forbidden knowledge? Lovecraftian characters do be enjoying their delving, often rationalists intrinsically motivated by the desire to understand phenomena. The Lovecraft worldview, present in many stories, at least the ones I've read, has the lust for scientific inquiry, paradoxically unveiling our insignificance. The desire to document, to unfold, the human, and I assume most of you watching are human, craving to know and understand always ends up being our downfall because it reveals too much of the cosmos. We cannot correlate all the contents of Revelation, and our only resolution is madness, death, or metamorphosis. Of course, Jacob would be the mirror match of yourself in almost every aspect. Much like him, you too have delved too deep, ignored the warnings of the punished, and found yourself at the precipice of tumbling down the same path as Karl Heinrich, Olmsted, or Danforth. And with Jacob out bee-hopped and fragged, the trash scrub, what is then the unfathomable, inescapable truth of Dusk, of the cults, the temples, the green stuff? What exactly happens when you follow the call and go towards the light?
Who did you expect at the end of all of this? God? The devil, perhaps? No. It's just me.
A dang-nabbit Lovecraft character in the flesh, Nyarlathotep. Defeat him, or rather, wear him down as your final test of worthiness. The worthiness of what? His power, of course.
Enough! You are indeed worthy. And so now, my power is yours.
Well, Sailor, looks like you got Lovecrafted. A classic ending, and no positive one. Nyarlathotep pretty much spells it out for you.
How does it feel? Horrible, isn't it? But wonderful, yes.
But if you're still in doubt of the prize these sweet fracking skills demand, let's look back at your descent, and I do mean descent. Traditionally, mythical descent is punishment. Just look at Orpheus and Dante. In Lovecraft, the descent happens literally in several stories, but most importantly is an ontological orientation. It spatializes our, humanity's, position in the vast, vast cosmos, perpetually perched on a crumbling ledge above infinite darkness. We live on a placid island of ignorance in the midst of black seas of infinity, and it was not meant that we should voyage far. And what happens when we voyage too far?
Who you were before is insignificant. Who you are now is inconceivable.
Embrace the temple's call. You being worthy, being the equal to or the match of Jacob is no absolution, it is corruption. Take a look at your homecoming. The very laws of the natural world are no longer in effect. Whether or not the environment is corporeal is insignificant. The effect on your psyche is all the same total. The erosion of the environment mirrors your ignorance. The further towards answers you go, the further you voyage from the island of ignorance, the more the world shreds, tears and tatters visually. The closer to the truth you get, the less you can trust your sanity.
The closer they got, the more they suffered.
There was no other option but to pursue the descent into the total loss of self, because the gunplay is that sweet, of course, but also because Dusk Dude himself is from Dusk, PA, like Olmsted from Shadow over Innsmouth, discovering his own fishy ancestry. The desire to seek answers and knowledge is at once both pathological but also somewhat hereditary. How could our protagonist not be susceptible to the allure of delving deeper, regardless of danger and warnings, with his inescapable connection to the cosmic horror?
Kill the intruder.
Every deeper discovery as you progress through the episodes only reveal humanity as not being the pinnacle of existence, but rather a fleeting, fluttering gnat in an ancient and incomprehensible universe. The transient visage of human civilization, insofar you'd define Pennsylvania as civilized, bleeds and tatters away the more levels you complete, until there is nothing resembling reality. From the very first brown, mundane maps of episode 1 to the reality-shattering arenas of the Nameless City, our presumptions about the nature of reality, our concepts of what belongs on Earth are challenged and eroded constantly until we are worthy, ready to embrace the great dark outer, the things far, far beyond what makes us human. When we cross the line to the boundless and hideous unknown, the shadow-haunted outside, we must remember to leave our humanity and terrestrialism at the threshold. Alternatively, Dusk is just fucking rad. Alright, that was a video. Thank you very much for watching. Subscribe for more slightly above average videos. Throw a like for the good old algorithm and comment down below what is your favorite Dusk secret or Easter egg. Next game will be a departure from the bookish narrative and comparative and lore discussions and analysis of yore, and a look at what a good let's say sandbox game can accomplish with a little bit of imagination. Thank you very much and see you next time.